Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to bring you the mastering of Spirit Shell. There's been a lot of questions, especially over the course of my Mythic progression, about how you can best master Spirit Shell and absolutely blast with it, really. Spirit Shell has been crazy dominant throughout all of Castle Nathria, and it has just completely overshadowed so many other healers. So I wanted to be able to make another video to kind of complement the 9.0 guide that I made, to start going over some of the lessons that I've learned as we've gone through all of Castle Nathria progression and finished US 4th. And wanted to start, kind of reflecting on some of the things that I learned to help you guys as you're going through your own progression. So starting it off, quick refresher. Talents, again, what you see here on your screen, for example, the usual sort of build. You're going to be running with Schism full time whenever you're playing with Spirit Shell. You're always going to be running with Mindbender because it aligns the Spirit Shell's cooldown and everything like that, to be able to just pump up those shields as great as you possibly can. Now, in terms of taking Purge the Wicked versus Halo, usually you're prepping lots and lots of shields before the damage actually happens, so often you're not really getting any heal value from that Halo that's going on. It's also a lot easier to be able to maintain Purge the Wicked and have more time for other damaging abilities as opposed to Shadow or Pain, things like that. So this is your usual setup that you're going to be running with for the Covenant. Venthyr is absolutely crazy insane. And of course, there's two soulbinds now, both Nadia and Theotar, that both have their second potencies available. You can no longer cancel aura Nadia's Thrill Seeker, so you're not able to have quite as much control over that. And then General Draven gets his second potency Conduit coming up very soon, as well as his Stand Your Ground buff, which is like the 4% healing buff for just standing still. So probably be looking at that, or Theotar. Sometimes Nadia can have some good alignments with your ramps, but other times it's just totally random. So as we got ourselves ready for that, Legendary you're going to be running with is Clarity of Mind. Getting that extra 3-second extension onto your atonements is really insane, because it guarantees that, the atonements that you have extended are going to be able to be hit with Schism, Mind Games, your Penance. You're going to hit a big chunk of your damage with that extra 3 seconds. It gives you a lot more room to work with, so getting a Sludge Fist kill is incredibly crazy important. After watching this video, I'd really heavily recommend you guys going into 2 or 3 boss encounters, depending on where your progress is at, and just working on a lot of practice for this. Pick fights like, Shriekwing or Sludge Fist that are very predictable, even Hungering Destroyer, very predictable boss fights that don't require a crazy amount of movement to be able to practice and get that ramp as consistent as you possibly can. And then we're going to talk near the end of the video about some of the more stressful situations that you can work on, that you can be dealing with as well, to help kind of get you through and still continue to have very powerful ramps while also being able to do the mechanics as well. So as we're looking at what your ramp should be, what is a ramp, right? Ramp's just a term that's been popularized since basically Legion, when they remade Disc, and it's basically building up a lot of atonements. This one doesn't really have like I'm gonna hit Divine Hymn, I'm gonna hit Tranquility or whatever. Your ramp is your mass application of atonements to be able to heavily shield, or in the past, heal the raid. So your ramp right now is going to be with Spirit Shell, and for most people, it's probably going to involve getting 6 or 7 powered shields. You can also cast a Shadow Mend into a shield as like your first cast, because Shadow Mend applies atonement at the end of the cast, whereas shield applies it, it's instant cast. So at the beginning of the global cooldown is when it applies it. So you can kind of go Shadow Mend into shield, and usually be putting out 6 or 7 shields. If you have a lot of haste, like 27 to 30 something percent haste, you can go with 8 shields, followed by your double Radiance cast. So as you're going to be seeing from my ramps, and you can see the action tracker in the top left of your screen, as we're going through a lot of these different ramps, it's going to be, like I said, that's 6 or 7 shields, followed by the double Radiance. Often I'll go Radiance, reapply Purge the Wicked, then cast Radiance again. And then there's a macro, and you'll see it on your screen right here, which macros together your unused trinket, because you really want to be using the badge that you can get from Conquest. Even just getting it at like 200 item level, if you really hate PvP, it's still very, very worth to go get. Ideally, get up to 1800 as you can. You don't lose any rating before 1600 as well in arenas, so it's overall just kind of like a grind fest. You get it out of the way and you're in good shape. A lot of people are also using the Insignia, the Alacrity trinket, which is just baseline haste because it's just a predictable trinket to go target, you know? So those are always good options. You definitely want to get the badge though, because you can macro, like I said, your trinket, your Mindbender, your Spirit Shell, all of those different things together to be able to just have one button that you can hit every single time. The bonus part of this macro though is that whenever you switch to Lenience for dungeon content, it'll still use Rapture as a mouse over macro so that you'll be able to just use it as you normally would. Whenever you activate Rapture, it'll cast a shield out onto whoever you're targeting or whoever you're mousing over at the time, which makes your life very easy. So you got the fundamentals of your ramp. You're going to be having that, like I said, 6, 7, or if you have tons of haste, 8 powered shields that you're gonna be pumping out. Radiance into Purge the Wicked, into Radiance, followed by your Mindbender, your Spirit Shell, your On-Use Trinket, all in the same button because Spirit Shell's off the global cooldown. That is then going to extend the duration of all your atonements thanks to the Clarity of Mind legendary, and then you're going to start damaging. So ideally, you're making sure you're hitting a target that's not going to go immune, because like the Council of Blood fight, some targets can go immune, which wrecks your Spirit Shell. You don't care if the target takes 99% less or 99% more damage. That doesn't affect your Spirit Shell shielding at all. Ideally, you hit the target that's taking a lot of damage, like on Sludge Fist or something like that, sure. But it doesn't actually affect any of your shielding or anything. It's only if they're immune is when it gets affected. So you'll cast your Schism, you'll cast your Mind Games, your Venthyr Covenant ability, followed up by Penance, Mind Blast, and your Smites. Best build up your shields. So most of the weight of the shields is going to come from the Schism, the Mind Games, followed up by the Penance. Those are the, that's the big chunk of it. So if you ever get into a situation where you're running late on a ramp, you're kind of falling behind a little bit, that's always going to be an area where it's better to, kind of cut your losses and make sure you're still early or you're before the damage comes out, rather than trying to sneak out a couple of extra atonements and then you're late and you miss the whole damage window, right? Keep that in mind. Some fights will kind of vary and we'll talk about that as well. So now that you've got that, that is your basic ramp. But what else do you do is one of the most frequent questions I get on the stream, as well as what else do you do when you're not ramping, right? So every minute you're going to be able to have access to Spirit Shell, but outside of that, you really don't have a lot of mana. Even if you do have an Innervate as well, you don't always have a lot of mana to be able to work with. So it's very important that you're being very conservative with your mana outside of your ramp window, right? That means keeping up Atonement on the tanks. You can spread around Purge the Wicked a little bit if targets are going to live for a while. You can use your Penance on cooldown. You do not want to use your Mind Blast on cooldown because Mind Blast costs a hefty amount of mana. You only want to use it with your ramps. And a lot of times you're just going to be spamming Smite. You have one extra Radiance charge that you can use in between every Spirit Shell, so you can produce a mini ramp if you'd like. So if you have a ton of mana, you can cast a bunch of shields followed by a Radiance and get that extra Schism to cast out, Penance, etc. If you don't have a ton of mana, then just cast the Radiance and make sure it's hitting the tanks, make sure it's hitting whoever has bleeds on them, and call it a day. So for the more advanced sections, that was the ramp, the mini ramp, and the in-between. You want to make sure you're being very mana efficient. Let's start talking about some more advanced topics as well, okay? When it comes to how to build your Spirit Shells stronger, a lot of people are saying, okay, well, I know that stuff. How do I make shields stronger, right? One of the big things with Spirit Shell is that it has a cap to it. The cap is equal to 60% of your maximum health, okay? You can increase that maximum health by using Desperate Prayer, your defensive, to start bolstering that up. However, I would warn you guys not to just instantly macro it together just because there's a lot of times, especially on progress, where you need to have that extra defensive and it doesn't always align with your ramps. But I'd say sometimes it does actually work together quite well. I think Sire to Nathrius is a pretty fair fight to be able to use your defensive and your ramp at very similar times, where you're saying, well, okay, I'm going to have a ton of damage going out at the same time that I want to be ramping, because I want to be ramping for like the blood price, or I'll be ramping for the incoming damage from the Crimson Chorus, which is constant ticking damage that lasts a very long time. Then you can take advantage of that. But other fights like Sludge Fist, especially on progress, you're very vulnerable as a priest, and you want to make sure that you have defensives when you need it. So keep in mind that works. Other things that do work are like Shaman's Ancestral Vigor, Ankh Totem, Stamina Pots, the Battle Master trinkets as well. There's a bunch of different things that give you temporary stamina bonuses that can all work to help build up your shields larger. So something to keep in mind to be able to kind of help you, and really the most common application is you can use Desperate Prayer, especially at times where there's going to be some good synergy. Another area where there's actually very good synergy is with mind games. So you know that you already want to use mind games anyway with your ramp, but you don't really think about it too much except for Sire Denathrius, where in Phase 1 it has a Night Hunter mechanic, and it's happening just before blood prices do. And the whole goal of it is while you're ramping, the Night Hunters are going to draw the lines, they're going to crash into their target, and they're going to deal damage to them, and everybody has to soak and hunky-dory, huzzah. The other side of it is that those Night Hunters try to actually heal Sire Denathrius based off of the damage they dealt to their initial targets. So the more people that soak, the less healing that he gets. But if you have mind games up on the target at the same time, then he'll deal damage to the raid, which consumes some of your Spirit Shell shields if you're shielding at the time. But if you still have mind games up on the target, it attempts to heal Sire, which then ends up damaging Sire, which then converts into atonement transfers, which create bigger shields. So in Phase 1 of Sire Denathrius, if you have the Shattered Perceptions conduit, you always run the Exaltation conduit, but there's some debate and everything like that over the second conduit you can run, but Shattered Perceptions is really good for Phase 1 to be able to help basically cheese this. So you have enough uptime, you can deal extra damage to the boss, and you can crank up your shields to infinity, right? Now that you kind of know all these different ways to crank up your shields, sometimes there's going to be fights which really start messing with you in terms of movement, mechanics. What do you do when things just go wrong, right? Starting it off, Stone Legion Generals. This is one of the most freaking annoying fights to play a Discipline Priest on, right? You have the Crystallize, which happens at varying times. Sometimes it's every 55 seconds, sometimes it's like 63 seconds or something like that. It doesn't like perfectly align with Spirit Shell the way you want it to. So one of the biggest things there is learning how to go early enough so that you can try to be able to generate the largest shields, but also understanding that you're not going to be able to always get the full maximum ramp possible, right? Sometimes you can get targeted by the blade, causing you to run out and not be able to cast your Radiance as quickly. Sometimes you're getting the Crystallize on yourself. You know, sometimes you have to cast the Master Spell because you want to have the Spirit Link Totem going down at the same time as the Crystallize Meteor is coming down at the exact same moment. There's a number of different things that are really happening. So one of the biggest things that I would tell you guys is try as best as you can to practice cutting corners on relevant areas. So, for example, if you start getting the blade on you, you have to run out, and you're still in the middle of like applying your power word shields, start casting, like get to your location, start casting your Radiances, and try to go early and try to preempt it as best as you can, right? And say, okay, I'd rather be early than late, especially on a fight like Stone Legion, where if you fall behind, you are absolutely left behind, and you just you could very well have a bad Spirit Shell in the first one if it means that the second and third are consistent and good, right? Rather than being good timing on the first one and completely missing the second and third. You know, the more that you're able to kind of lock down those timing, the more potent your overall shielding will be. Stone Legion, you often we're going to lean on multi-dotting with Purge the Wicked. You know, you're going to lean on your Mindbender's attacks and just trying to get out, you know, your Schism, your Mind Games, maybe your Penance if you can, with enough time remaining. Artificer Zymox is another great fight to be able to, well, get you into really big trouble with some of your ramps, and it's very awkward when you're having to have ghosts chasing after you, when you're having to run out specific mechanics, like any of the portals, for example. A lot of these fights start sort of coming together and challenging you in terms of your movement and your positioning and everything like that. So one of the biggest things I would stress is watch what you have to do next, because you have such a wide range of time. You usually have, you know, a good 15-20 seconds or something like that in between each Spirit Shell, where you're able to say, I can move around a lot, I can reposition myself, I can start preparing for the next thing without really any HPS punishment, because your job isn't to cover all the healing all the time. Your job is to cover the healing once a minute, and then provide some nominal support on the side, help the tanks out, help whoever's taking priority damage from like Withered Touch, for example, right? So when it comes to dodging ghosts, watching for where you have to move next. Some ghost chases, you want to already be in the middle of the room. Some of them are going to have you, for example, run to the portal or using the lock gate. Some of the opportunities, for example, to take advantage of your Door of Shadows. For example, when you're getting chased by ghosts, you can use Door of Shadows really quickly, and then you can start being on the run, applying shields, get into the corner away from the ghosts, get your radiance charges out like you'll see on the clip and everything, to make sure you're not going to be in a poor position. There's a lot of different fights that are going to mess with you like that, and trying to understand that you have so much time in advance to say, okay, well, I'm at the edge of the room, I just finished my ramp, now I can take the time to start walking around, moving around, and reposition myself to better be able to maneuver as needed. If we're looking for timers for specific fights, I'd really heavily recommend checking out my written guides below. I've got a link to them in the description. I go over every single boss encounter. I go over all of the relevant mechanics that you want to be ramping for. I also have when I hit Spirit Shell, so I start ramping about 15 seconds before that Spirit Shell timer, so you can check all those out in the description below, as well as having 1-minute clips for every boss fight except for the last 3. And the last 3 boss fights I have are first kills or second kills with commentary and going over pretty much everything. So be sure to check it out. Let me know if you guys have any sort of questions, comments, concerns, anything I can help break down for you guys. Otherwise, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you all found it informative. Love you faces. I'll catch y'all next time.